Hi, this is Lori from Shoo Shoo Paper Art, and today I am sharing 3 Valentine background ideas. What these cards all have in common is something that I'm calling vertical divide. And you can see that really clearly on this card. It's like 2/3 a plaid and 1/3 hearts. And you may have seen in the past I might use 2 different decorative papers. So there's at least 1,000,001 ways that you could do vertical divide. But these are just 3 fun ideas that I wanted to share for Valentine's. So let's start with this card. Okay, so I started first with a card base that's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And I started out with the plaid. And I just kind of decided ahead of time that I wanted that to be the majority of the background. So I kind of thought of it as 2/3 of the background. And I'm going to attach that to my card and go ahead and anchor that down just a little bit better as well. I'm using these brushes that I got from Amazon, and I'll have them linked below. And I'm starting with Twisted Citron Distress Ink. And I'm just going to fill my brush and then just rub it across the stencil, of course. Covered with the Twisted Citron, I went back in with a little bit of peeled paint, distress ink, just to give it some depth and definition. And I'm going to use one of the smaller brushes that came in the pack to do that. I'm just going to do it in a few places, like on the edge of the card, down at the bottom. There is to it for the plaid part of this card. Lift that off gently. And there, the plaid part is done. For the hearts, I used a couple of older stamp sets. And it happens they're both from Stampin' Up! You're So Sweet and Hearts Aflutter. So I decided to do some overlapping hearts and adhere it to my block. Okay. And I'm just going to ink that up with some of my favorite ink, which is this fresh ink. This is called Celery. Put in some littler hearts. You can see on the one that's finished, some of the tiny ones from the set. If you're interested in this vintage Valentine, I do have it ready to download on my blog. It will look like this when you print it out. She was originally holding a heart, but on my particular card it was really damaged. So I just went ahead and got rid of it in the finished product. And I wanted to change these hearts a little bit as well. So you can see on the finished image that I die cut hearts out of white paper, and then I colored them with my Copics because I wanted something fairly close to this color. And then these are just heat embossed. So that is the first idea for a vertical background for Valentine's. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, so this card I consider a vertical divide background because all the action, so to speak, is only on one side of the card. So this one's fairly easy to do. I started out with a panel from, let's see, what is that from? It's from the Blueprints 27 dies from MFT Stamps. And I decided that I wanted the 3 hearts down the side, and I didn't have a die that had 3 hearts on it like that, so I thought, well, I can figure out how to do that. So the easiest way I found to do it was to give myself a guide. So I just used pencil and ruler, and I made a line about 1 1/4 inches from the left-hand side, and then just drew a line vertically, very lightly, just as a guide to help me place my hearts. So I used one of my heart dies from my old Spellbinders, and I knew that I needed to get 3 hearts, so I just kind of eyeballed kind of how they were going to fit. So I decided to, instead of just making them all straight up and down like that, I decided to have them turn a little bit. So I started this one at an angle, kind of tilting towards the right. And I knew I wanted a little bit of distance from the side so this wouldn't be terribly weak. And I placed it about right there, and ran this through my Big Shot. And I'm actually going to, of course, run it through 3 times, turning those hearts just a little bit as I change their position. Okay, so now I've done the die cutting, and the reason I don't show that on the video is because I have a Big Shot Plus, and the bed is about 8.5 by about 14, and I find it really hard to get under the camera. I really love it, but it's huge. So this is much easier just to do it off camera. I'm going to erase the pencil line, what's left of it, off the card, and then I'm going to do the pink around the edges and the little bit in the corners. When I first did the card, I thought that I only wanted the very edges colored in pink, so I just used a piece of scrap paper to kind of keep me from getting into the rest of the card, and I used this little bitty round brush, which was absolutely awesome. I love it. I used some more fresh ink, this time in Sugar, which is one of my favorite colors as well. I really love this ink. I think it works really well, and they're such pretty colors. So just loaded up my brush, this little tiny thing that was so fun, and just started swirling it onto the edges of the card. And of course, I could have made it easier on myself and taped this down, but you know how it is. So I'm going to go ahead and do all the edges just like this, and then I'll come back and show the brush that I chose and to do the add color to the corners. So once I had that done, I decided that I actually wanted some more color kind of on the corners. So I selected this larger brush to do that with and just loaded it up with ink, and then just brushed it on the corners. And it starts out really light, so I had to do it several times to get the color that I wanted, which is actually fine with me because I really like having a little bit more control over the amount of color that goes onto the card. So just keep turning it and putting color on the on the corners. It's time to do the background of the hearts, and at first I couldn't decide what exactly I wanted in the background of the hearts, but when I looked at the little bears those cute little bears from Mama Elephant. I thought about this little guy, and that made me decide that I wanted kind of a sky look in the background. To do that, I cut a template, a little border that I have that's scalloped, because I just find that a lot easier to do. And just to make sure that I didn't get blue distress ink out on the edges, I went ahead and covered up just a little bit, make sure it doesn't get into my heart, just a little bit of that area so that I don't, because I really do tend to be a little messy. So just kind of get an idea of where that needs to be. Now, I'm just going to use this as a guide. So I'm going to slip my template underneath and kind of decide where I'm going to start the sky. So I'm thinking about right there. Okay, and I'm going to use tumbled glass distress ink, and I'm going to use another one of the brushes, kind of a mid-size brush for this. And I'm just going to take it off and around the edges of this little guide here to make my sky. You can see that there. I'm going to go up a little bit more and just kind of change the trajectory of it. And do the same thing again. When I get through doing this one, I'm going to lay my heart piece back on top and kind of see what it looks like. Okay, so I'm thinking that that looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. So I'm going to go ahead and move down to the second one, and again using this as my guide, the heart top as my guide, I'm going to slip that under and maybe try to make it look somewhat different from the top one. So let me just kind of maneuver that around a little bit. Okay, and then I'm going to be a little bit more bold, and I'm not going to bother with blocking off the sides. I'm just going to assume that I can do it. Actually think that that looks pretty good. I'm very happy with that. Okay, the next thing to do is I'm going to pop that up just a little bit. I don't want it to be too terribly far off my base of my card, so I'm just going to use this foam tape, and I'm going to just tear off strips for this side, and then I will do some little strips, little squares and rectangles in other areas. The front of this card is finished off with 3 of the little bear agenda stamps that I just colored with my Copics and stamped in the little tiny heart from the set. The sentiment, "You're very sweet," I just generated on the computer. I created a black rectangle and typed in "You're very sweet." And this is the inside of the card. I'll lift that up, show you. It has another of the little bears and just some washi tape holding it in place. So underneath the You're Berry Sweet, all I did was tear off a strip of this foam tape, the length of, or close to the length of the sentiment. And then I just folded this in half because I wanted it to be a little bit taller. So fold it in half like that and peeled off the tape, stuck it behind and put it on my card. So that is the last of this one, and let's move to the last card. Okay, so this one almost didn't make the cut for being a vertical divide card. When I first started out with it, I had a wider card and it looked more like a vertical divide, but I decided that since there is more on this side, I'm going to fudge a little bit and call this a vertical divide card as well. This kind of has some fun techniques on it, so let's get started. First of all, this card base is Bristol, 3 3/4 by 4 1/2. The reason I'm going with Bristol on this card is because I'm using Zig clean color markers for the color on this card, and I do like it better on Bristol rather than watercolor paper. Seems easier for me to work with, so that's why I'm going with Bristol for this card. So let's start with the die cuts here. This is a die cut from Simon Says Stamp, clipping heart die, Hey Love, and it just comes connected together like that. So I cut 2 of them out of 120-pound cardstock, and I'm actually going to glue them together. The hearts doubled. I'm going to cover them with VERSAMARK ink and heat emboss them. This is probably the most low-tech way you can do this, but I'm using a piece of catalog to do that, and it works just great. I'm going to cover my die cut with VERSAMARK, and then I'm going to sprinkle this die cut with, let's see, what is this? This is Recollections Sparkle embossing powder. I am just going to hold this. I actually use part of my jewelry clippers or holders or whatever these are called, I can't remember, to hold that because it's so thin. And now I'm just going to heat emboss. That's done. I'm going to glue it to the front of my card. When I first started this card, I didn't think that I was going to do the little kittens and the cup in gold embossing. I thought that I was going to do them just with a black ink, and I decided when I kind of laid it on there that it was okay, but I thought it might be fun for them to be gold outlined as well. So I stamped and heat embossed the image as well, and that is, let's see, it's called the Purrfect stamp set from Winnie and Walter. Okay, so this is really the first real project that I've done with the Zig Clean Color Real Brushes. I have a set of 90. I've already taken out the ones that I'm going to use, and I realized when I got them that never was there a better reason than to do a swatch of every color because I can't tell. I'm going to have to think about the storage. But anyway, I took 2 pieces of 11 by 14 Bristol and did each color as it comes, and then each color with water and a brush, and wrote down the number and the color. And I did it by row. So like this is the first row of the box, the second row, the third row, and it's based just on the chart that is online at their site. So I'm going to need to do a lot more practicing and a lot more experimenting to figure out what all these brushes will do, but I'll show you what I did for this particular card right now. Okay, so I have glued on the heart die cuts that I made earlier, and now I'm ready to use the Zig brushes to fill in the hearts. And I'm also using let's see, this is a number 4 silver black velvet brush, which I really love these brushes. Okay, so I'm going to start with that big heart in the middle, and this is, I have no really idea if I'm using these right or not, but this is what worked for me. So I'm just going to put some color in there and get some water on my brush, and then just pull that color out a little bit, just kind of like so. And I am going to try to keep it within the die cut, so we'll hope for the best on that. And I'm just going to speed this up and keep adding color and water and using the brush as I go. Basically it for the hearts, and now on to the little kitties in the teacup. The little hearts there are so small that I went ahead and just used the brush to fill in those hearts. The pen itself, rather than going back in with water, because they are so small. And plus I kind of wanted them to be bright as well. Okay, after this dried, you can tell, I'll show you this one. I went back in and I used an ink pen or a felt tip pen to put the eyes and nose in. I just colored on top of the embossing powder and put in a couple little stripes with my brush and some dark gray, and then added more pink to the ears and to the cheeks. So that is all I did with this card. All right, well, I'm so glad that you joined me today, and I hope that you got a few ideas for doing some Valentine backgrounds. Thank you for joining me, and you can always find me at shoo-shoo paper art.com.